Okay, and another thing is, I got a little assumption of why none of the animals want to go by there.
Why?
Maybe they see the apparition of the dead dog, and it's warning them not to go there.
Maybe. Maybe. I mean, that's pure conjecture. Who knows? But no animals will go near it?
The observations I made was my dogs and other people's dogs, that come visit, they won't go there. If I put them on a leash and try to drag them there, they'll dig their feet in there, and they just will not budge.
You know what, Mel? I once was on a trip with my family going to we used to go to Florida, drive to Florida in the winter, and we once got near a slaughterhouse, and on one of our stops. And, man, I had a golden retriever, and that golden wouldn't get anywhere. He did the same thing. He dug his feet in, and I don't care how you'd pull, he wouldn't get any. He could smell the death.
Welcome back to Enter the Abyss, and guess what, guys? We're covering Mels Hole again.
Mels Hole again. We've got more to talk about on that hole of Mels.
God, I love that intro. It's just like, we got slaughterhouses in Utah, right?
Yeah, we have a few.
It's got that little bit of a smell. I mean, I've never had a dog in that area, but the idea of them being afraid of a place because it just has the scent of death intrigues me.
Yeah. So what was that? It was like a radio call? Was that what that was from?
Yeah, so in the first episode of Mels Hole, we covered the first call, and this one we're going to enter the prologue and the second call.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Turkey Day, huh?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Went to my my grandmother-in-law's house. It was really good. Had a lot to eat.
Yeah, I love eating. Any holiday where you get to eat, I'm there.
Well, you can eat on any holiday, really.
Yeah.
But this one specifically.
Yeah, I just love the idea of turkey, gravy, and mashed potatoes.
Yeah, those are the three that you need. Maybe some stuffing, but yeah, it was pretty good. So I didn't think we had that much more about Mels Hole to cover.
Oh, there's so much more.
Sweet. I thought that we put Mels Hole behind us.
Mels Hole Part 2.
But can't be talking about spooky shit without beer. So we've got some Salt Flats Brewing Co. Douche Coupe.
I call it Douche Coupe.
Copper Lager.
Douche Coupe.
It's all right.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it.
It's all right. I mean, I've had way better. I've had way worse, though, too. I've got to be honest. It's not the worst beer, but
way better.
I've had so much better than this. Awesome. Well, while you're covering Mels Hole, I just went and found a couple places around the world that are just the most haunted or creepiest. So I've got 3 places I'm going to be talking about.
Okay, so not creepy holes, just creepy places.
Yeah, no, you got all the holes covered.
Oh. So I was doing a little bit of research on here, like how did this story get on the radio? And it first happened to a fax to Art, who's on Coast to Coast. I'm going to read the fax that was sent to this gentleman.
Okay.
I'm writing you to see if I could get some help from you or your vast listening audience. I live in rural eastern Washington near the Manistash Ridge. On our property, there is a hole, like the previous owners and the owners before them. We've been throwing our trash into that hole, and apparently the hole has been there for as long as anyone can remember.
Good old trash hole.
Right? At first, I thought it was an ancient well. Anyway, the hole is 9 feet by 9 inches in diameter. There is a stone retaining wall around it, and we put a steel door on top of it to keep anyone from falling into it.
That's a big old steel door.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, don't fall in.
I wonder how long they would yell.
Yeah. Didn't you say that in the first one, like, people would rappel down, or did no one rappel down yet?
No, they were saying that they should do that. Someone made a joke about throwing a cat down there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, don't do that.
As I said earlier, people have been throwing their trash into the well for a decade. Furniture, household trash, dead cows, building debris, you name it. The thing is, I noticed the hole never filled up, so I got curious, actually obsessed. Began trying to measure the depth of the hole. I emptied 3 fishing reels of about 1,500 yards of monofilament trying to determine the depth. So I was buying fishing line in bulk. So far, I've sunken about 80,000 feet of line into the hole without reaching the bottom. My wife works at the local university with a geology department. We hope to get some professional scholarly help in determining the depth of the hole. As far as I can tell, there is nothing else particularly strange about it, except for 2 other things. Dogs refuse to get within 100 feet of the hole, and birds won't sit on the retaining wall or metal door. Another strange thing is there is no echo when you yell into the hole. Indeed, I've never heard of anything hit bottom when tossed in. We once tossed an old refrigerator, and we never heard it hit the bottom. Could you imagine throwing a refrigerator
Into a hole.
down like a cliff or something? Like,
But then you never hear it hit the bottom.
yeah, that's crazy. No crash, no splash, or crunch. I hope your listeners can help with possible explanations. I'm wondering if this, based on my measurements thus far, might be the deepest hole on Earth. Signed, Mel Waters.
Okay. So what do you think it is? Like, what do you think this hole is?
Well, we'll get into theories. It's hard to say. You know, we'll cover theories on the last episode of this. But, I mean, if I were just to speculate, it's framed like a bottomless pit.
Right, but, you know, we know bottomless pits don't exist.
You know? Maybe it
Or
just
it's
goes
just the
so
one.
far into the Earth's mantle that it just burns the trash.
Oh, okay.
Or maybe there's a place it teleports to, like the moon.
Yeah, that would be cool. Like a moon teleportation device. I mean, if it actually did go down to the mantle and burned it, that'd be like the best trash disposal you could have.
Yeah. Could you imagine? So you do a radio program about creepy shit, and you get this fax. What would you do?
I'd call him.
Yeah, that's-
immediately. Like, all right, we're getting this guy in the line.
That's exactly what Art did, and he called him. In a couple of days, he had him on the air.
That's
And
the one we just listened to.
that was the first episode that we covered. Was
that's right.
what he talked about on there. So a couple of days after he was on air, Art got another fax. So I'm going to read it. You're receiving this fax simultaneously with a fax I attempted to send you earlier today. Much has developed since the first fax. I'll try to explain as rationally as possible what has transpired since my earlier fax. Around 1 p.m., I drove to Yakima to shop at the Costco there.
Throwing shit down in bulk.
Yeah, right. I was thinking, all the toilet paper, that's where it went.
Yeah, it's in Mel's hole.
Damn it, Mel.
Mel's hole took all the toilet paper.
On my way back, I decided to stop at the property. When I go there, my access road was blocked by military personnel that were armed. I noticed that several pieces of yellow gear had entered and exited my property based on the direction of their thread. I asked one of the guards, "What's going on?" He said, "There was a plane crash on the property." I said, "Well, that's strange. There's no smoke. I don't see any in the distance."
Did it fall right into the hole?
Man, I didn't think of
Plane
that.
just go right into the hole.
Imagine that.
Plane went down. We just don't know where it is. There's this massive crater.
He's been saying Mayday for like 9 hours.
Mel's hole took a whole plane.
That's
Jesus.
so. Maybe that's where Malaysia flight 370 went.
That's
Maybe.
probably where Amelia Earhart is too, in Mel's hole.
Gosh dang it. God. He asked who I was, and I let him know that I own the property. I then asked to talk to the officer in charge. A non-uniformed man came up from my Suburban and let me know that I won't have access to my property until the crash has been completely investigated. I mentioned the yellow gear and the lack of smoke, and they were on my property. I was told by this man that it's not necessarily my property, and that it would be very easy to find a drug lab on my property. Imagine that. Like, why are you guys in my house? It's like, whoa, don't ask questions. You might have a meth lab.
You're cooking some coke in here.
Well, I got the drift. I asked if I could leave. He said, sure. Don't come back until we contact you. I asked if he wanted a way to contact me, and he said, they know how to contact me.
Oh, that's ominous.
That's not good.
You want my phone number? Bro, we know how to get a hold of you.
We'll call you when we need you. Get out of here.
Just get the fuck out of here. Don't look back.
We're the government, motherfucker.
We know everything.
I said, I suppose you don't want me to talk to anybody about this. And he said,
Damn right.
nobody would believe it anyway.
Oh.
Right?
You can try, but they're going to think you're cuckoo. Fucking loony bin.
That's about it for now. Oh, I talked to one of my neighbors earlier today, and he told me something very interesting. He said that some time ago he was driving up to the hole at night and thought he saw the most bizarre thing. He said that he saw a beam of solid black coming out of the then uncovered hole. I said, what do you mean? He said he saw something blacker than black, coming from the hole like a searchlight reaching into the sky as far as he could see.
Jeez.
That's crazy.
It's like a portal to another planet.
That's so interesting,
galaxy.
right? That's so intriguing.
Yeah, that would scare the shit out of me. You just see like this big thing, blacker than black, just come out, go up to the sky.
Like this big black shaft going right into the sky.
Right into Mel's hole.
Sometimes I feel like this is just an elaborate joke.
It's gotta be. I don't know. I mean, it's an ending hole.
I have something for you, Britton.
Regarding the hole, it sounds to me like the government's going to take the hole and give Mel the shaft.
That is what it sounds like.
Nice.
That's hilarious to me. They're going to take your hole and give you the shaft. So, what we're going to be covering after this is we're going to dive into call number 2. And we'll just do play-by-plays on what's going on. And we'll also play some of the listeners' calls that called in and asked questions or had something to say about it. But before we do that, Britton, let's jump into some of your creepy locations.
Creepy locations that don't involve any holes. Let's do it. So the first one is Nagoro, Japan. Have you heard of Nagoro, Japan?
I feel like I may have.
So it slightly resembles the Island of the Dolls that we covered a while back. Remember the whole island full of creepy dolls?
Yeah.
So this one, in the valleys of Shikoku, Japan, lies a village called Nagoro that is almost entirely inhabited by dolls.
Nice.
Sounds like a place I want to live.
And one creepy dude.
Oh, there's more than one.
Here's all my dolls. You want to see them?
As of writing this, there are roughly 350 of them scattered throughout the entirety of the village. The person responsible for these dolls is a woman by the name of Tsukimi Ayano. She had been away from the village for a while but decided to return home, and upon arriving, the population had severely dwindled as the former residents had either left in search for employment opportunities or had passed away.
Oh, man.
Imagine returning home and there's just a few people left.
Yeah.
It'd be so sad.
I just buy a bunch of dolls and replace them.
Oh, she didn't buy them. She made them, bud.
Nice.
In an attempt to battle her loneliness, she took to making dolls out of straw. These dolls were made to resemble the previous townfolk and replaced where she remembers seeing them the most. So, like, if she saw someone fishing all the time, she'd put, like, this doll in the river, so on and so forth. So it's like an actual town that just has all these dolls resembling the townsfolk that she knew doing what she remembers them doing. So, it's pretty crazy. Whether that be on a bridge overlooking the water, hanging out on the porch, etc., there's an entire classroom full of over a dozen children dolls, which is just as terrifying as it sounds. So, like, there's a picture, a whole classroom just full of these children dolls.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of sweet. Imagine, Britton, you go outside and you see, like, a replica doll of yourself in the front yard doing what you always do, yelling at your neighbors that are, like, replica dolls of them. And they're yelling back at you, and you're like, wow, who did that? That's really kind.
Yeah. It's like, I look like an asshole right there. But, I mean, it is kind of sentimental because, she obviously wanted to repopulate the town with people that she remembered. But it just, some of the pictures look really creepy because, like, there's this one doll that's, like, peering behind, like, a hay bale or something. And it's like, that's really creepy. And at nighttime, can you imagine just seeing all these dolls just sitting around?
A doll, like, looking out of a dumpster menacingly.
Right. And if one of them just decided to move on its own. Fuck that. So she even has them dressed in old clothing that had been left behind by some of the residents. So they're all fully clothed and, it just looks kind of crazy. This idea to populate the town started one day while working in her garden. The first doll was made to resemble her father, and then along came the rest of her family. And then she decided we're just going to keep going to make this whole town. So it continued for over a decade, which leads us to this point in time with an entire village populated by dolls. If you take a stroll through the streets, it's going to be very difficult to avoid the stare of hundreds of dolls. The dolls heftily outnumber the breathing denizens of this town, as there are less than 40 that still occupy this tiny little village.
I'm curious how long it took her to make all those dolls.
It said decades. Like, it's been...
I bet it would have taken a long time because it sounds like she put a lot of work into these dolls too. If they can, like, recognize who they were from the village,
right? Yeah, no, like over a decade. So 10 plus years is how long it took her. So, but that's it. I mean, there's really not a whole hell of a lot of other information. But like, I came across the pictures and it was like, it's just to be in that village would just be super eerie. I mean, it is a sentimental thing because obviously she wanted to bring back her childhood memories, but
yeah,
it's a scary looking village.
They have something called the Uncanny Valley that gives like people like the weirds.
Weirds.
Yeah,
I
like
got the weirds right now.
If you have something that like sort of looks human but not, it like there's a psychological component in our brain that makes it feel creepy. And this reminds me of like, there's a lady like one of those websites where you sell homemade goods, you know, I know that's really popular. Yeah, like Etsy. And she makes realistic baby dolls, like really hyper realistic, but like they're just super creepy because there's just something off about them. And that just triggers your brain like something's wrong here. Right. Like run.
Well, it's like that show I was talking about a while ago called Servant from M. Night Shyamalan, who I know you love.
I hate him.
We haven't spoken about him in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Actually.
Why you gotta bring him up?
But he has a show on Apple TV, and it's like this couple that lost their baby, and they get one of these really hyper-realistic babies that's supposed to help her cope, because it looks like a real kid.
Yeah.
Like it's creepy, like you're saying, but some of those dolls just give me the fucking creeps. All right, so back to you, Cleet. Let's go talk about another hole.
So, Art gets his facts, and he's like, oh man, Mel's in trouble. Let's call him and get him back on the air.
I imagine, like, as the, so Art's the guy who gets the faxes. So I imagine Art's just sitting there like, I'd be eagerly anticipating more of these, like, oh, come on, right back. I want more of these stories. Like, he'd be the one you'd want to hear from.
Yeah. Art did say at the end of this program that this is one of the best stories ever told, heard on Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
Right? All right, so after reading both faxes on air, Art and Mel get on the line and state that when he called Mel earlier in the day, he was totally freaked out. Mel agrees, but says that he is a lot calmer now. He brings up the fact that after the first call, on the Friday after it, he went up to the property and noticed some helicopters flying around the property.
Yikes.
He also saw helicopters around the property the following day. He figures that someone listens to your show in regards to that someone being the government.
Ooh.
Right?
Government's always listening.
Big brother.
I hear you.
I had to filter out some of the calls because someone's like, I'll bring my gun up there.
Oh, God.
So aggressive. I'm like, no. He's like, screw the government. I'm like,
throw my wife into that hole.
Oh. Art tells Mel that his best protection in this instance to be as open and public as he can be. Mel goes on to explain that on the day he went out to the property, access had been blocked by uniformed armed soldiers and vehicles, and that currently access was restricted even further back from the property by concrete Jersey barriers, which are a standard military access restriction device used to impede the flow of traffic into and from an area. Mel says that right away he noticed that there were no smoke, which you would expect to see if there was a plane crash.
Unless it goes right into the hole.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think someone missed that. You should have called in. Said, Mel, I know what happened. That plane went right up your hole.
You're not going to see any smoke because it's in your hole.
Like the soldiers were telling him had happened. Okay, so the plane crash like the soldiers were happened, yeah. Right. He asked to speak to their officer in charge, who he would have guessed was another member of the military, only it was a man dressed in civilian clothes who approached him and told him that he wouldn't be able to go up to his property. The man stated that it might not even be Mel's property anymore and brought up the possibility that they may find a drug lab. Yeah, right?
What are you using to cover up with this big hole of yours, Mel?
There's a math lab up there. We see subtraction and addition everywhere.
Smells like meth.
That wouldn't have been an issue, but Mel admitted that there was in fact a lab of sorts on the property.
Oh, no.
Hang on, let me elaborate.
See what you did there? Good for you, bud.
He said that he works in alternative health field and had imported some plant life from the northern Nevada area.
He's making some essential oils.
You're right. The plants, which were used by Native Americans to treat various illnesses, were not of any narcotic nature. But Mel feared that those in charge of his property could easily misconstrue his medicine lab for a drug lab, if they so desired. He worried that they could take the land based off on that alone, and it seemed to Mel that the officer was hinting towards that with his comments. Earlier that morning, Mel had received a message from his real estate agent on his answering machine. The message was that someone was very interested in purchasing the property and that they would be willing to make a very generous offer.
Some random somebody is so excited to buy your property.
It's like, yeah, we won't throw you in federal prison, and it's ours now.
Just take the money and go, bud.
That's the offer. No money. I'm just kidding.
just leave. It's ours now.
Mel was unsure about whether or not he should sell the land, but was curious about what the offer actually was.
I mean, you kind of be curious, right? Like, you get a fax, someone really wants to buy your property. You'd have to kind of be like, all right, what's the figure? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, a very generous offer. I'd hear him out. Like, I'll pay you double. I'm like, I'm out.
Yep.
See you.
Bye.
While out on the land during the weekend, Mel was able to take some quick measurements of the hole and the line that was down inside it. So this is before the government came in, okay? He used a fisherman's scale and tied it to the end of the line, as well as the original 1 pound weight that he had actually attached it to previously. So this is the 80,000 foot line. The weight on the line in the hole measured about to be 17 to 18 pounds. The weight of the line itself would cause it to snap at the top of the pressure put on itself. That's crazy to think about. Like, the fishing line would be so heavy under its own weight, it would finally snap.
Yeah.
He was positive that he had 80,000 feet of line already down the hole.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Like, I would be terrified to have a hole that deep on my property.
Right? Imagine falling into that. You're just like, and you run out of breath, and you're like, should I scream more, or like, what's going on?
Just be infinitely black.
Eventually, would you just get bored while you're falling down?
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. You're going to get bored while falling to your death.
You're like playing some cell phone games, you're like hoping like it won't
playing
die.
Snake.
Like, I'm gonna die from thirst. All right.
Let's play some Tetris.
When asked about how long he owned the property, Mel states that he had it for about 4 years, and the previous owner was there for 30 to 40 years. The property is without electricity or other amenities, but he does have a few buildings up. The buildings and the housing structures were damaged recently in a heavy snowstorm. Mel reiterates a previous story as it was told to him about the dead dog. He goes on to tell about how people have been throwing dead animals too inside, like cows and sheep, down the hole for years. A hunter's dog died, so he tossed the dog down the hole as a form of burial. Right?
No more 6 feet under. You're going 60,000 plus feet under, bud.
I'm sorry, Charleston. You had a good life with me, and now you gotta go.
You were a good dog.
The hunter was out hunting later on and saw the dog with the same collar and the same tags on it.
What?
They were convinced that the dog had come back to life.
It's the real Pet Cemetery.
Right. It has everything.
The Wendigo's going to come out of this hole.
Ooh.
UFOs.
Because of this, Mel decided to change his will to say that when he dies, he wants his body to be thrown into the hole.
Nice. Good for you, Mel.
A lot of this audience would not have heard, but there was another little bit of a legend of the hole. Apparently, at some point, somebody threw a dead dog into the hole, right?
Oh, yeah, I was telling you about that before the other night, and, people throw everything in there. There's dead cows going down the hole, there's, sheep, whatever, you name it's gone down there. One guy threw his old hunting dog down into the hole, I guess, as a form of burial. And the story that I heard was that the hunter, was out there hunting one day, and he saw his old departed dog. It looked exactly the same. In fact, it was wearing the same collar and the same tags on it. So he was the story is they were like absolutely believed the dog came back somehow.
And you believed it to the degree that you changed your will so that when you die, they were going to throw your body into the hole, right?
When I'm gone, I go into the hole.
When I'm gone, I'm going to the hole.
Isn't that fucking sweet, though?
I think I would do that.
That is cool. I love it. But now, he's lost access to his property, so maybe he won't be able to be thrown down his own hole.
You just have to pay somebody hey, when I go, just quickly run in there, throw me in the hole, run away.
It's like, Mel, get your head out of your hole.
Well, I'll switch over to one of mine then. So we're going to go to Poveglia Island now. So the next location, Poveglia Island, is said to be the most haunted island in the entire world. Poveglia Island is a tiny little dot of land located in the Venice Lagoon off the eastern coast of northern Italy. Its history is checkered with good and bad, with the latter making it a place of horror. This island was used as many things, from military checkpoints, safe havens, and even a mental institution for those battling mental illness.
Oh, man.
The history most well known to the island is when it was used as a quarantine zone and dumping ground for those suffering from the bubonic plague. Imagine how many people they would have to dump from the bubonic plague.
Do you know how painful that disease was too?
Jeez.
The amount, like if there is such a thing as spiritual energy that latches onto extreme emotion, like the bubonic plague would be an amplifier.
Oh,
and like
God,
that
yeah.
place would be so hyper haunted.
That's what they're saying, is because this is literally, I mean, we'll jump into more of the history, but this is where they dumped a lot of bodies that died from the plague.
Dude, I bet.
So the locals call it the Island of Ghosts, as it's riddled with dark energy and unhealthy spirits, just like you said, right? If unhealthy spirits and like energy latches onto a place, this place is just gone. The earliest mentions of the island come from early 5th century and was documented as a safe haven from invasions by Alaric the Goth and Attila the Hun during the decline of the Roman Empire. Military forces often left these islands alone as they were very easily defended. So they're just like, yeah, we're not going to try because they're going to be able to defend themselves pretty easily. Others would inhabit the island, including hundreds of slaves when the governor was killed off in 864 CE. During the Chioggia War with Genoa in 1379, the residents of the island were forced out to a different island in the Venetian lagoon. An octagonal fort was built, and Poveglia was turned into a military outpost armed with naval artillery. So it started as a military outpost, which again is going to bring a lot of death and negative spirits in, and then just continually gets worse. The island would then remain vacant and unpopulated for roughly 2 centuries, despite efforts from the government. There was even a push to have monks occupy the island in the 1500s. That brings some peace and serenity there. Let some monks go before the bubonic plague hits.
That's funny. Let's bring in the monks.
Right? It wasn't until 1576 and 1630 that the island found its purpose, the aforementioned colony and dumping grounds for victims of the bubonic plague. The first major bubonic plague struck Italy in 1347 and Sicily, which would spread to Venice by 1348. The plague claimed roughly half the Venetian population, which taught the Venetians a great deal about the spread of the disease. Can you imagine half the population being wiped out?
That's crazy.
Like, this plague was rough. Like you said, painful. It just spread like that. When back then, you didn't know much about diseases and plagues, so you just kind of oh, what the fuck is happening?
They probably blamed God. Like, what have I done?
Yeah. Yeah, it probably was. Oh my God. I peed in the field yesterday and pissed God off. Through their constant observation, it was deduced that the spread of the plague came from people in ships that came into contact with it. It was quickly realized that something needed to be done and that a separation needed to be performed from the sick and dead and the healthy individuals. Large burial pits were constructed for the corpses at 2 locations outside the main city, digging these huge pits to dump the bodies into.
Let's make a corpse pit.
Unfortunately, the bodies were piling up so fast from the plague that the 2 pits filled rapidly and became overwhelmed. In an attempt to manage the overflow, masses of bodies were transported to 2 other islands in the lagoon, San Terrasmo and San Martino di Strada. It's 3 islands are just being, bodies are just being dumped on these islands.
Imagine, you're just digging a hole for whatever reason, making a basement. Maybe you're digging for gold and you just find thousands of skeletons, human skeletons.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. With the pits being full and the constant transportation of bodies, they needed an alternative and fast. This came in the early 1400s when the Venetians invented the concept of the lazaretto, which is an institution or hospital used for quarantining ill citizens. A small island in the lagoon called Lazaretto Vecchio was home to the first lazaretto. Much later, during an excavation of the island, archaeologists uncovered more than 1,500 skeletal victims of the bubonic plague buried deep in the pits.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So like you said, you're digging a plot. Oh, we're going to have a nice little school here.
I'm going to start a family here.
Thousands of skeletal remains. But they also believe that there are still thousands that remain buried to this day.
It's hard to tell with a skeleton, but they all seem to be screaming.
God damn. That's dark. I don't know if you've had the energy to scream if you're dying from the bubonic plague. I think that's a slow, painful, miserable death.
Yeah.
Actually, not slow. It's probably pretty quick. I don't know. I'm not an expert on it. The island was used for dumping grounds during the following plagues in the 1570s and 1630s. During this time, barges were responsible for moving bodies to the island. If you had even a mild symptom of anything, you were immediately stripped away from family and society to be taken to this island. Once you arrived, you would spend up to 40 days in quarantine where people either died or in very rare circumstances recovered. Wow. So can you imagine having like a mild cough? And they're like, yeah, you're coming with me. They rip you out of your family, out of your town, put you on this boat, dump you on an island.
And if you weren't sick, you're going to catch it there.
Yeah. Well, in quarantine for 40 days, like just a mild cough, you're there for 40 days with these people that are actually dying from the bubonic plague. Authorities on the island took to burning thousands of bodies to help prevent the further spread of the disease. In 1777, the Magistrate of Health seized control of the island to turn it into a checkpoint. Any ship or boat that was on its way to Venice needed to pass a highly rigorous inspection as a preventative measure against the disease. In the 1790s, 2 ships failed to pass the inspection, leading to cases of plague being found on board. This resulted in Poveglia once again becoming a quarantine colony for about another decade until the 1800s when the hospital was closed. It's just so much death and decay is just being brought to this island.
Yeah.
The island was repurposed again in the early 20th century when it became housing for the mentally ill. As time passed, stories about the sinister treatment and experimentation of patients began to surface and spread to the outside world. Rumors of doctors committing suicide in order to escape the accountability they would surely face rose as well.
I have beachfront property for sale for you, Britain, at a highly discounted rate.
No thanks. I'm good where I'm at here in good old Utah.
Utah.
One doctor claimed that the tormented and angry souls on the island haunted him, and his only solace was suicide. Another telling of that same story tells of someone or something pushing him off of the tower. What do you think, Clete? Suicide or ghost pushing him off the cliff?
It was probably both.
The island was finally abandoned for good in 1968 when the staff and the patients left. To this day, it is unoccupied, unless you count the thousands of spirits that are said to haunt the place. If you were to visit the island, which is prohibited, you would see the crumbling remains of a hospital, a church, and a shelter for boats. An attempt to auction the island was made in 2014, but was unsuccessful as the only bid was $704,000.
Oh, man.
Yeah, they're like, no, we need more than that. The island, with its rough history, is popular to those who believe in the paranormal and has been on several television shows, such as Ghost Adventures and Scariest Places on Earth.
Yeah, I saw it on Ghost Adventures.
You saw Poveglia Island?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I just, like you were saying earlier, though, like the amount of just energy that place would be exhibiting, like from thousands and thousands of bodies just being dumped there, I can't, like, it probably just feels heavy standing on that island.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So that's it. That's Poveglia Island.
Oof. God,
back
Britain.
to Mels Hole.
Way to be a downer, man. My God.
I know. See, what they should have been doing is dumping them in Mels Hole.
We need a joke. Hang on.
Regarding the hole, it sounds to me like the government's going to take the hole and give Mel the shaft.
That is what it sounds like.
All right, back to Mel's Hole. So, since he is unable to gain entry onto the land, and because he heard about the black beam of light, he decided to go out and talk to some of his neighbors to find out more about the hole. He talked to one elderly man who lived in the area a long time, who said that originally there was a series of stone columns around the site of the pit.
What?
After sketching out a picture of them on a napkin, Mel brought up a photo of Stonehenge on his power book and showed the man. The man stated that they looked exactly like that, just without the pillars on top of that famous site in England.
Wow. Well, there's like lots of rumors of Stonehenge being like, I mean, there's so many more rumors. I think we're actually going to talk about it in one of our iceberg episodes, but
Yeah, absolutely. He was unable to get any photographs of the hole itself, naturally, because the blockade to his property. He was even too afraid to take photos of the guards on the road, but was willing to get a drawing of what the hole looked like. Mel mentioned a fax that Art talked about on his show about another mysterious hole in the Washington area. Art said that yes, in fact, he did receive another fax about a hole located in Colville, Washington. Art would try to get that fax later in the show. Mel brings up Project HARP.
Project HARP.
Yes, which is theorized to look at underground anomalies. Art then reads a fax sent from another listener in regards to Mel's own hole. The listener states that iron veins in Manistash mixed with the electromagnetic properties of the Earth's core could create some type of time machine, some type of hot tub time machine. This could explain the lack of echo in the depth of Mel's hole.
So it's literally just a time machine.
Yeah.
The following is a theory regarding Mel's property. 1. Imagine 2 naturally occurring iron veins just happening to reach toward the Earth's surface around help me pronounce it. Manistash? Washington. There is a tremendous amount of naturally generated high-voltage electricity deep in the Earth. What if the bottom of the hole on Mel's property is a naturally occurring focal point, a lot like the device that Mr. Markham built? The Earth could have its own, in effect, time machine. Over the centuries, through various quakes and so forth, all of the soil above the portal would have fallen into the bottom and been launched into some other time. This explains the lack of echoes and the apparent depth of the hole. Tell Mel to lower a clock down there.
Could you imagine, like, being in the 800s?
And a fucking fridge just drops down.
You're, like, foraging for food, and a giant fucking fridge just falls out of the sky. And you're like, what the hell is that?
And it would be empty. It's like, this is someplace you could store some food.
Or a dead cow just, like, hits the ground and explodes.
Man.
Yeah.
So, like, what was it in trying to think of it, like the when was it, like when it was like raining fish?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like
Mel's hole.
Yeah, it was Mel's hole. People were just dumping a bunch of fish down there.
Yeah.
So Mel's hole caused all these sorts of like plagues and all sorts of things.
Send us the manna. All right. So having time on his hands, Mel went to the local university library to look up what he could on geology. He mentioned that the crust on average on Earth is about 20 miles thick. Underneath the crust, you have the Moho discontinuity. I probably butchered that. Which he explains P waves or seismic waves move faster through this part of the Earth due to the chemical differences. Little is known about the area because of being unable to reach those levels. Art says that he had all sorts of volunteers that wanted to go down into the hole and that he had a lot of plans for it. But those plans were ruined now. They have control of it. Mel talks about how far away from the hole he actually stopped at. The access road is a narrow area, and you'd have to go about 1.5 miles or more before you'd even see the land. Art then asks about tossing down an entire refrigerator and the fact that Mel never heard a single thing from it as it went down. Mel,
it's now in the medieval times.
Yeah. Like lands on somebody like a king. Like, holy shit. Mel expected to hear something from an item that massive, and even threw down an exploding television picture tube to no avail.
Wow.
Yeah. It seems impossible, but the hole is 15, 16, 17 miles, so there's no way to even hear sound coming if it had hit the bottom. They wonder if you could hear the sound from those distances, even with it being a vacuum. Mel mentioned that the deepest mine is only 2.3 miles deep in the hole into the earth. Mel then wonders how long the channel is overseas. I had to look what that is. It's like it's a tunnel through England to London.
Oh.
Or it goes underground too. It's under the ocean too. And Art says that he was going to go through it but missed out. Mel jokingly says that he thinks the next thing going down the hole will be federal prisoners.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine that?
Make someone disappear, like that's the place to do it.
Right? He makes it clear that it is the government that is interested in the hole and his property. They will want to know everything they can about it and its properties, and he thinks that they would send someone down there to see what was down there.
Would you go down there if they offered you, like, hey, we've got this hole, we'll pay you $50,000 to go down there?
I go down it for free.
Really?
Oh yeah, I mean I'm not gonna jump, but
Rappel down.
You just make some type of cage device that I know is not gonna break on me. Like I'd be cool with that. I don't want to risk falling in though, unless
it would be scary.
Unless I have like a death thing. I don't want to be falling in a hole forever.
Thing.
Yeah, some type of, I don't know.
Because he's already guessed it's 80,000 feet. It's going to be fucking dark.
Not to mention if you really are going down into the earth, it heats up and you just burn to death would be your real way you would go.
Yeah. No thanks. I don't know, I'd still be curious to try it, but after a while you're not seeing anything. It's just pitch black.
Yep. As he touched on earlier, Art asked Mel how he would like to gather up a bunch of local citizens and march up to the property and challenge the government's authority. Property rights are a big thing in that area, and Mel had this same conversation with an older man earlier in the day. But if they say that it's a plane crash, what more can Mel really do? There were no plane crash reports, even though it would have been major news in the area, as it has been in the past. Art then says that he should round up as much media as he could and go up there, but Mel is again worried that he'll be arrested as a drug manufacturer because what the man there said to him. At this point, Art takes some phone calls from listeners. One caller again suggests that Mel bring out as much media members as he can, but Mel believes that he would get in trouble. He then talks about how you can't see the hole from the air because of the amount of snow. Art suggests that it could be an experimental aircraft that crashed, which would explain the lack of the news, but he doesn't believe that it actually happened on Mel's property. Mel says that he saw absolutely no smoke at all. Art thinks that the hole is worth at least $1 million, and he could sell tickets.
You could.
Yeah.
You could sell tickets to this. Like, even if you said, hey, bring something to toss down this hole.
Yeah, and it's like, let's see if you can hear it. Like, you imagine like the stuff people would bring.
Oh, God, no.
I would try to find
restrictions.
I would push a car down there. I'd be like, all right, here's a Toyota Corolla. It was made in 1970s, and it runs pristinely because it's a Toyota. We're going to push it in.
Yeah, you'd have to build like a railing around it and have like, well, you said that there's like a steel door. You'd have to have like just a little opening so like people can't be pushed. Could you imagine like someone pushing someone in? Manslaughter.
Is that your wife? Whoa!
Oh my God.
That's your wife.
You're now single and going to jail.
So people are calling it because this is a radio show. They're listening to it at night and they're like, they want to put in their 2 cents. So let's throw in one of the listeners' calls.
Hello there.
Yes, this is Robert in Milwaukee.
Hi, Robert.
Art, just had a thought connecting Stephen Greer at CSETI with what he said on concerning interplanetary travel, and drew a connection to the cloning. I find it very interesting that the scientists say they're not going to consider cloning humans.
Oh, baloney. That's a bunch of crap. You know, don't listen to that. Excuse me for a second, Mel, on the subject of cloning. You know, all day I've been listening to this drivel from the scientists about the cloning thing, that we're not going to do it. Oh, well, yes, this technology will allow cloning, but we're not going to do it. That is utter garbage, and when we get around to talking about cloning, which we will, we're going to talk about it in an entirely different vein, because unless you are naive beyond belief, spending your time talking about whether we should or shouldn't, will or won't, is baloney, because we will. I guess you can say, should we? But we will. I guarantee we're going to clone.
I love how, like,
he got fired up.
I know I love how angry he gets at his viewers. Like, I'm not gonna play all the calls that came in.
Garbage.
But he's so rough around the edges. So yeah, apparently Art is a big believer that human cloning is going to happen, even though the government says that they have morals. So I don't know.
We have morals. We won't clone people.
So we'll jump into another call that I liked. Here we go.
Hey, Mel?
Yeah, hi there.
Hi there.
Where are you, sir?
I'm in Oregon. My name's Pete.
All right, Pete.
Okay.
Where in Oregon are you?
In Corvallis.
Corvallis. Okay, I know what that is. Sure.
Okay, yeah. I was listening to the show, and I guess it's a delayed broadcast out here. I was listening to earlier stuff.
No, this is about Mel's Hole.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, sir.
And yeah, I would just say to Mel that you need to get in contact with just about every media person that you can think of, and get him out there.
He's done that with me, and I agree with you. I just said to Mel that he should take, like an army of cameras out there. But
yeah, exactly.
He's afraid that he's going to end up in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's got a point.
Well,
I mean,
think,
suppose the army of cameras with Mel in tow arrive, and there's feds there saying, "Sorry, this is a crime scene." Is this Mel Waters? Well, you're under arrest, Mel.
Well, I have to tell you that as far as what I believe is now that the surface of the hole there has been, there's a lot of snow on the property, has been covered up with snow. I think that's what the yellow gear was there for, is to groom it all, so you can't see it from the air.
Well, I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered.
And
if the military's out there, if there was a plane crash, I think the media would want to know what kind of plane it was, who was flying it.
Well, you see, the thing is, I'm the one that's saying that there was a plane crash.
Yeah, Mel, I'll tell you something. And for what it's worth, if it was a civilian airplane that crashed, that would be in the news. If it was a regular military airplane that crashed, that would be in the news. But there are some type of aircraft that crash, Mel, that, believe me, it does not make the news. We have them out here. They crash, and you see the military cordon off miles of area, and there's no news about it at all. This secret aircraft that fly and crash. But I don't think that's what happened there, and neither do you. Do you?
No, I don't believe that anything crashed there, because I didn't have the smell of the smoke. I didn't see any smoke. It was a beautiful, clear day. I mean, if there was any, and it wasn't particularly windy. If there was a crash, there'd be evidence of it. There'd be smoke clouds.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I would be very cautious, Mel, about accepting a generous offer for the property with the hole, because you know what? No matter what else, Mel, your hole is worth millions of dollars. If it's what you say it is, if it's as deep as you say it is, man, you could fence a property and sell tickets.
Your hole is worth millions.
I wish my
I wish my hole was worth millions.
So that's why sometimes I feel like this is like an elaborate joke somehow, just because of what they're saying. Your hole is worth millions.
There's a lot of euphemisms. All right, so the last place that I wanted to cover is called Leap Castle, and it's in Ireland.
Nice.
So it's located in Kildare County, Offaly, Ireland, and is reportedly haunted by several ghosts. The construction of the castle happened anywhere from the 13th century to late 15th century, but is most likely around 1250 CE. It was built by the O'Bannon clan, and they originally named it Leam Uí Banane, or Leap of the O'Bannons. These O'Bannons were the secondary chieftains of this territory and were in rule of the O'Carroll clan.
Yeah, is that like your ancestors, Britain? Huh? You make a little castle?
Yeah, right. I thought it was pretty cool. Some evidence supports that this castle was built on the same site as another ancient stone structure that was possibly ceremonial in nature. This meant that the area was consistently occupied since the Iron Age in 500 BCE and possibly since Neolithic times. So this land has always been occupied.
Nice.
The annals of the Four Masters tell that the Earl of Kildare, Gerald Fitzgerald, tried and failed to take the castle in 1513. 3 years after the failed attempt, he would try again and managed to partially demolish it. The O'Carroll clan regained possession of the castle in 1557. I'm rooting for the O'Carrolls.
Why did they want to demolish the castle? Did he just
wanted
hate
to
it?
take ownership of it. He's trying to seize it.
Well, maybe it was blocking his view of where he was living.
He's like, I want to see the ocean, goddammit. Mulrooney O'Carroll died in 1532, which caused major struggles for the O'Carroll clan. So Mulrooney was the leader of the family. A rivalry broke out amongst the family for leadership, which saw brother fighting brother. One of these brothers was a priest, and while holding a mass for a group of family members, which is now called the Bloody Chapel, a rival brother burst into the chapel and fatally wounded him by impaling him with his sword.
Oh my God.
Right? Priest brother fell onto the altar and bled out in front of his family. Imagine just holding like this service, and he comes in, fuck you! Stabs him right through the gut and bleeds out.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Killed his brother because they just want ownership of the clan.
You bastard.
In 1659, the castle passed ownership by right of marriage to the Darby family. In this family were notable members such as Vice Admiral George Darby, Admiral Sir Henry de Stair Darby, and John Nelson Darby. During the tenure of Jonathan Charles Darby, his wife Mildred had several seances in the castle. Mildred happened to be an author of Gothic novels, which led to publicity about the castle having ghosts. The central keep of the castle was expanded later on to house several extensions, and in order to pay for this, they raised the rent, and a lot of the land surrounding the castle had to be sold off.
Damn.
It's like, let's just expand our castle, but we have to sell a bunch of land, but it's fucking worth it. It's going to be a huge place.
Got a sweet castle.
This was believed to be the motivation for the burning of the castle during the Irish Civil War in 1922. After the castle's destruction, Mr. Darby obtained a reinstatement estimate from Beckett and Metcalf, who were surveyors in Dublin in September of 1922. So on the reinstatement, the castle is confusingly listed as Leap Castle, and the net amount of claim was £22,684.
Damn.
Or 22,684, I apologize.
Oh.
Which is equivalent to $1 million in 2018.
Okay.
So, but they did settle the claim later for a lesser amount. So, the ruined castle was bought by Australian historian Peter Bartlett in 1974 because Bartlett's mother had been a Bannon. Bartlett and a builder by the name of Joe Sullivan got to work restoring the castle and continued to do so until Bartlett passed in 1989. Since 1991, the castle had been privately owned by musicians Sean Ryan and wife Anne, who continued to do the restoration of the castle. So it's owned by a musician.
I wish I could buy a castle.
Right? A whole island and a castle. Why
Yeah.
not? And Mels Hole. While renovations were being performed in the 1900s, workers came across an oubliette behind a wall in the chapel. An oubliette is a room or a cell in which prisoners were held and is most likely underground. At the bottom of the shaft, they found many human skeletal remains on wooden spikes that had been impaled.
Jesus.
Wooden spike. Can you imagine, like, oh, we'll buy a castle and renovate it, turn this into the game room. Oh, shit.
Like, I'm going to keep this room.
Right?
It's my torture room.
Just leave all the skeletons in there on the spikes.
Yeah.
It's like, don't piss me off, or this is what's going to happen here, bud.
Yeah.
It took 3 full cartloads to remove all of the bones from the room. Today, the dungeon remains sealed off and covered over to keep people away from it. The belief is that the O'Carrolls would drop guests through a trap door, impaling them on the spikes about 8 feet below.
Oh, my
It's
God.
like, welcome to my castle. Bye.
You're bad people, Britain.
I'm not bad. My
You got a
ancestors-
little a chute where you shoot people down from your house in your basement and impale them?
I got a new room I want you to see, Cleet, in my house.
Right on the butt?
Right on the butt. They recovered a pocket watch from the dungeon dating from the mid-1800s, which shows just how recently that room had been used. So, let's jump into some of the good stuff, which is the supposed hauntings that take place at the castle. A red lady is said to walk the halls holding a dagger.
All right.
Freaked me out. She's like walking. You wake up for a glass of water, and this red lady's running at you with a dagger.
I got my knife.
2 little girls named Charlotte and Emily will run up and down the hallways and spiral staircase, playing as children often do. Emily died, unfortunately, falling from the battlements on top of the castle, and her sister Charlotte can still be heard running after her sister, calling her name.
Yeah, I'd be yelling at him like, keep it down.
Shut up!
This happened years ago.
Get over it.
Get over it.
The castle has been featured on Scariest Places on Earth and Most Haunted, along with the Atlantic Paranormal Society and Ghost Hunters. The most recent filming took place in 2014 when Ghost Adventures filmed their 10th season Halloween special at this castle. I need to watch that one. It's said to be haunted by a sinister elemental spirit, which was described by Mildred Darby as being the size of a sheep with a human face, black holes for eyes, and a nose which smells like a rotting corpse. The castle calls itself the world's most haunted castle.
That's a bold claim.
Yeah, well, I don't see any challengers, so that's it. Okay, well, let's wrap up with Mel's Hole.
Back to the story. There seemed to be temporary buildings and a generator equipment set up already at Mel's area on his property, just days after or so after the first phone call. Mel saw helicopters Friday night and Saturday. He was confused about the timeline, but thinks it may have been Sunday. Some neighbors saw them moving buildings and trucks onto the land on Sunday. Originally, Mel first contacted Art just to get some ideas about the hole and admitted that he was pretty naive about the entire thing. Art then asked him to be completely honest as far as the lab he has out there and its contents.
I'm going to need you to be really, really honest with us here, Mel.
I'm gonna need a pinky swear. You make a meth.
What kind of fucking lab you running?
Mel says that it is simply a medicinal plant lab and nothing drug related. After a break, Art took some more calls from his listeners who had questions or advice for Mel. They talk about the oddness of the black beam of light and the dead dog stories. One caller asks Mel what he does for a living, to which the same caller says that Mel should round up the media and the local militia to go up and call their bluff in regards to the property. They wouldn't drag up a bunch of military trailers for a drug lab, which Art agrees with. Another call wonders if Mel could charter a plane to do a flyover his property, and Mel thinks it could be arranged, But he isn't sure if the planes could even fly over the area. He thinks the hole itself has been covered over with snow and whatever else the government was using to cover it up from the air. Mel's dog and other dogs won't go anywhere near the hole, and they seem afraid of it. But both agree that dogs and animals can sense bad things and know when to avoid it.
Animals are smart like that, man.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, they have this inner sense, right? Yeah, I'm going to listen to it. Humans don't do that very often.
Yet another one, who hailed from the general area in Washington, said that a professor of his one morning talked about a great big hole and that had no bottom back in 1989. Mel was genuinely surprised to hear this. The caller states that the area in which Mel's property was located in, near the Yakima Training Center, which is a government facility. He thinks that it is something related to things going on at the government military base, which explains their interest in it.
Hey, Art, this is Scott from Kirkland, Washington.
Yes, sir. Oh,
Hi, Scott in Washington.
Yeah, not only from Kirkland, I've only been over on my side of the mountains for a little while, but born and bred in Yakima and a graduate of Central Washington University.
Cool.
Spent a lot of time in Ellensburg.
Yes.
In fact, I sat around with one of my old professors who is one of these guys who has been living in the area for, forever. And he actually had told me rumors one morning over coffee, sitting down in one of the little restaurants, about a great big hole that nobody knew the bottom of.
Wow.
We'd actually heard of this. This was back, 1990, 1989.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime about in there, and we even heard that. And the one thing, it really surprises me, this guy that was saying, well, I took a gun in the media up there. What a lot of people don't realize, Art, and I think that most people don't realize, is he lives about, depending on where the hole is, between 5 and 10 miles away from one of the largest military reservations in the Pacific Northwest, possibly the western United States.
It is humongous out there.
The Yakima Firing Center is where they did all of the training for Desert Storm. They have a bunch of satellite dishes up there that theoretically don't exist, that they use for talking to satellites that aren't there, and all sorts of things, very interesting things go on up there. And so something like this, a hole appearing within spitting distance of this military reservation, it doesn't really surprise me a whole lot that they had trucks and stuff out there in a lightning bolt.
That's interesting.
Yeah, you imagine a professor from a college or a university saying that?
No.
That's crazy.
But I didn't know that there was, that the military unit right there was responsible for, there was a Desert Storm and stuff?
Yeah.
All of a sudden this hole appears?
Supposedly, I don't know the guy's probably telling the truth, right? So, Mel reiterates that the hole has been there for 40 years or more. If he remembers correctly, the previous owner was there at least that long, and the hole itself was there before even that. He ventures to say that given the nature of it, that it has been there for a very, very long time, and thinks that it's ancient. Mel again talks about how much of a mental and physical wreck he was after the run-in with the military personnel the other day. It really shook him, and it was unexpected. He thinks he could possibly get some media to go up there and see what's going on, but the military might just turn them away. The man in charge told Mel that nobody was going to believe him anyway, so go ahead and tell them anything he wants. He thinks that they're working him on both sides, with both the threat and the offer to his realtor. If given the chance to have a sit-down with someone in charge, he says that he wants to get a relocation out of the country. He brings up Australia as a place he'd like to move to.
Australia?
Australia, eh?
Everything wants to kill you in Australia.
Yeah. He got eaten by a crocodile. The end. Another caller mentions a story of a hole in Scandinavia in which miners lowered a microphone into a deep hole and heard the screams of 1,000 people in agony.
Holy hell, he found hell.
It's hot.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus was right.
That would scare me. You put a microphone down there, you just hear screaming of thousands of people. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, so this story was originally ran by the Associated Press, but it turns out that the story was untrue. Mel's hole could be something similar in theory due to the lack of echo and the dogs being afraid. They go over the lack of sound again, bringing up the larger items. Mel says that they just slide big items over into the stone wall and just shove it in.
Just go on, shove it in.
He's got to shove it in the hole. He says that they've dumped all sorts of things in the hole, including a full-size cows. Art thinks the bottom of the hole will be disgusting if they ever find it due to all the things tossed down there.
Imagine
all the blood and guts because they would just explode. I swear they would. I don't know if it's already like a dead cow and you got all the biological like gas building up in there, and it just hits. Yeah,
like eventually you just start hearing the bottom just. Then you just see it rising up.
Ugh.
What if the hole just starts shooting everything back out one at a time?
Just all at once. Just goes all at once.
Oh my god.
Maybe that was the black beam.
Yeah, it's just launching all the shit out of there.
After yet another break, Art brings up a few faxes of people who do not believe the story sent in. They say that his voice is wavering and that he's struggling to keep up with the lie, and that because Art is playing him along, he's having to keep up with making excuses as he goes. Mel takes those challenges head on and says that he would much rather not have brought up the hole in the first place. He sent in the facts, but it was Art who called him. Mel makes an analogy of the Empire State Building, shooting, and safety and how things can change in a second. He would be happy to talk with his neighbors and see if they are interested in talking with Art about the hole. A caller from Texas calls and asks how wide the hole is, to which Mel says 9 feet 9 inches. The caller suggests that he look at a book called The Hollow Earth, and that he should check it out because the Earth was never proven to be solid like they say. Another caller talks about the same theory and brings up some Bible verses about how the Earth may be hollow.
Oh, man.
Mel says that he is not a religious person and doesn't think that there is any religious aspect to the hole, but possibly a paranormal one because of the dead dog and the black beam.
There's always someone who's like, oh, man, God.
It's God did it.
It's God's hole.
God. It's just the whole call. Yeah, so-and-so from Salt Lake City. Cleet, go ahead. Yeah, Mel, I have a question for you. God. And then disconnect.
It's God.
Yeah, I bet Art would be pissed. All right. So he would like to get his local political leaders involved if he can, and thinks that they would be on his side because of their stance on property rights. Art says that they could both go to the media and the government power that Mel needs to help him out if he wants. Mel says that he has to sit down and decide what he wants to do with the hole. He owns the land, but isn't sure if the local police or sheriff could help him at all in terms of telling the federal government to get off the land. He has all kinds of things related to his plant work in his lab, and they could easily make it into a drug lab if they wanted.
Do you want to build a drug lab?
Amen. After a caller says that she thinks Mel is simply just trying to gain some fame and is making up the story, he says that if he had a topic that he'd really want to talk about, he would have called talking about his medicinal plant work, since Art was in Nevada and the plant life came from there. One female caller asks if he's considering talking to a psychic, but Mel says that even if he takes the money and runs, he still wants to know what's down there. He's curious as to what the hole actually is, and believes that he would be willing to accept what a psychic has to say. Mel isn't worried that someone finds out who he is and welcomes the media finding him, and he would lead them to the access road and let them do their thing. So hang on here real quick. Let's play the skeptic call because it made me laugh a little bit.
Mel, I think that you're looking for some kind of notoriety for some reason, and I think that you think everybody is pretty gullible that is listening to Art Bell's program, and that you're taking unfair advantage of him.
All right, you've got to remember, dear, I called him.
But didn't he originally
fax me? Yes, he did. He faxed me with information. As a matter of fact, I read the fax at the beginning of the program with Mel tonight, and I read it over the air. So he didn't anticipate that I would call him, didn't ask me to call him.
Now, another caller asked if Mel has ever seen any UFOs at or near his property. Mel said that he hasn't seen anything like that himself personally, but plenty of listeners have said that it's a very weird area out there, and that their area UFOs and holes are all over the place, which is kind of a weird comment. Yet another caller warns Mel that anything he does is going to just slow down the process, because those in charge of the hole now are listening to the program.
They're always listening.
Big brother. He suggests that Mel try and find out as much as he can about radar and flights in the area and see what he can find about in terms of the crash or in the area in general. Art believes that the plane crash story was a lie and that it was just a cover, and that the story about the drug lab was clearly a threat. Mel says that he's just going to think about it and call the realtor in the morning to find out who's making the offer. He says that the land isn't for sale, but wonders how they were able to make an offer in the first place. Art says that it's possible to make an offer on anything, even if it's not for sale.
Yeah, anyone can. I get offers on my house still in the mailbox. Like,
I do
we'll
too.
buy your house in cash for this much.
It's so annoying.
Fuck off.
Yeah. Art says that he feels guilty about soliciting Mel on the air in the first place and offers him in terms of the media or government contacts. He says that he's got some thinking to do about it and appreciates all the advice. He doesn't blame Art and thinks that it could have happened at any time regardless. The show runs out of time and Art says goodbye. So
that would be it would be shitty because you're on your property, you find this, bottomless pit that you think, and you're like, oh shit, I'm going to call and talk about this. I think it's going to be cool. And all of a sudden you've got like military and government and like these strange offers, and it just like turns into this whole shit show because like he said, like I just wish I wouldn't have said anything about it, just kept it to myself. Like it's just one of those things like, do you want to share this? Because who's going to want in on it?
It's definitely an intriguing story, I'll give you that much, right?
I still don't know what it is.
A bottomless pit, talks about on the radio waves, and
so he doesn't have access to it anymore. It's not his.
As of call 2, yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there's going to be a few more calls. I think there's going to be maybe 3 or 4 more episodes on this. So, buckle up. We'll see. I'm not sure how much content's here because I just research it one call at a time.
All right.
And I really like this series so far. But
yeah. And if any of you have any other stories or maybe you've seen Mel's Hole, let us know.
Yeah. Anyways, guys, if you're watching us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe our channel. It really helps us grow. We want to hit 100 subs, hopefully by the end of the year. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.